This is Meet the Pros, the interview podcast series from Anyone Can Book a Gig. My name's Eamon Laughlin. I'm the marketing and creative manager for Anyone Can Book a Gig and for the agency MusicWorks International. And I'll be joined, as always, by Matt DeLeon, an agent and our education manager for the team. It's time to get into the area of labels and music publishing. And I'm recording this a little bit after our interview with Lense that we'll get to shortly. And as it turns out, I had a couple blind spots here. I really learned a lot through this conversation, and I'm hoping that you will as well. Lense is currently the CEO of GroundUp Music, but before he got into running both their label and their publishing company, he has a lot of experience doing music copyright work and also working for performing rights organizations like ASCAP or BMI. It's a little bit of a diversion from the topics that we've covered so far, but I think it's all the more important because of that. So I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you afterward. Welcome, Eric. Thanks for taking time to meet with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So we started these interviews by basically just asking for a little bit of background on how you ended up in your current position. How did you end up in the music business? Was it always your dream or your goal? And kind of how did those decisions come to bring you where you are now?
Yeah, I was always going to be working in the music business from a fairly young age. I knew what I'd be kind of doing. I went to college for music business at a small school in upstate New York called SUNY Oneonta, which is a music business program. I interned on the merchandising side of things for a little bit, and my first job out of college was at a company called ASCAP, which is a music licensing company. At the same time, I was a musician. I am a musician. I have a bunch of guitars behind me. I'm a drummer by trade, and I was doing a whole bunch of gigging around the city as well. I'm in New York. And so while I was working at ASCAP, I was also sort of like honing my craft as a drummer and session player. I worked in the ASCAP repertory department for 3 years, which is largely just taking copyright data and importing that into performance history. So like songs put on the radio, how do you know who the songwriters are and who the publishers are? I did all that linking. It was very data heavy and very boring. I thought I wanted to go to law school, so I took the LSAT and I applied for a job in ASCAP's legal department. And I got a job as a legal assistant to a very young lawyer there, whose name is Andrew Sparkler. That's his real name. And he became one of my closest friends and my mentor in the music business. He's currently the CEO of a company called Runner Music, but I can walk through his history as well. It's really, really interesting what he's done. He basically convinced me not to go to law school. He convinced me not to go to law school, and that for what I was looking to do, I had to kind of find my own way in the industry and find things that really mattered to me. And so while I was thinking about that, I was playing a gig at the bitter end in New York City, and half of that backing band were members of Starkey Puppy. I met them that night. I fell in love with their musicianship, and I basically asked what their deal was and what they're working on, and I quickly fell in love with them as a band and kind of had this split in my career where I was working with them just to help consult on very basic things in my free time while having this very corporate job at the same time. In 2011, I left ASCAP to work at Warner Music Group, which is the major label, sort of like the octopus head of Atlantic Records, Warner Chappell, Warner Brothers, Warner Music, Elektra. All those lots of labels under the Warner umbrella. I worked at the corporate entity that kind of bound them all together, doing litigation analytics and employment law. It could not have been further from music. So I did that for 2 years, and then I went back to ASCAP. Andrew Sparkler hired me back. He had moved from legal into a membership role, meaning he was signing songwriters all day and retaining songwriters all day for ASCAP. And so I was trained very quickly in how to assess talent in the songwriting space and the publishing space. And our boss was a guy named Randy Grimmett. He was the head of membership at ASCAP and a good friend of mine. And 6 months after I started at ASCAP again, he left to start his own PRO with Irving Azoff called Global Music Rights. And so right at the time where I was learning how music licensing worked, the largest competitor in the space became very relevant and a main competitor of mine. So I went from working with this guy to competing against him for all these deals. It was like very intense. I did that for 3 years, and it was very challenging. It was very hard work. Lost a lot of good writers to GMR, which was like hard for me, and I can definitely discuss that some more. And at that time, CSAC, which is a competitor of ASCAP, reached out to me about a job opportunity, and they basically offered me a job to run their BA team or business affairs team in New York. So in 2016, I left ASCAP, I moved to CSAC, and Michael League asked me at the very same time to begin working to set up a publishing company for him for GroundUp, which was already a company that existed, but was only a label. Yeah. So I moved to CSAC and I began setting up a publishing company for Michael League at the same time, and began signing writers to that publishing company. And in my time at CSAC, it was very interesting, and I did a lot of really cool work and a lot of cool deals. I signed Green Day and Adele. I signed Ariana Grande, Randy Newman. So like a lot of really cool stuff, but it wasn't really speaking to me in the same way as the GroundUp work was. And so I was at CSAC for about 8 years doing these kinds of deals while also doing more and more for GroundUp. In 2020, the pandemic happened, obviously, and Michael asked me to take over running the label and the publishing company full-time. I met him halfway, and we made me a COO of the company part-time, where I always had a team working for me, but I was not doing day-to-day work so much. I was really just organizing the budgets and working on our next record signings and getting the publishing company really up and running. And in 2024, March of this year, I left my job at CSAC to run GroundUp full-time. So it's a very long history, but it's kind of led me to this place now where I'm working full-time as the head of a independent label and publishing company, signing writers and artists to multi-year deals.
And it sounds like it all kind of dates back to what was kind of a chance meeting with some of the Snarky Puppy players.
Very much. Those guys have become some of my best friends. I'm very lucky.
Yeah. That's something we've heard over the course of these interviews is sometimes chance meetings or just relationships that you build are the things that determine where you go, and you have to maintain those relationships.
Absolutely. I think relationship management is one of the most important things to know how to do in the music industry, and how to appropriately leverage your relationships. No one likes the guy who spams you with emails every other day because they want to work with you, or there's a way to cultivate relationships and grow them, and knowing how to do that is really essential in growing in the industry, I think.
Can you talk a little bit more about that way to cultivate relationships and how you've worked with that before?
Absolutely. I think there are two things that really matter, to me at least. One is a really clear method of communication. Sending lengthy emails, talking about all the things you can do and have done. No one has time for that, right? And so being able to give yourself an elevator pitch really succinctly when you're meeting someone goes a long way. The second thing is we work in an incredibly selfish business. And so people want to know what you can do for them. And knowing what you can pragmatically offer someone, right? For me, it was when I met the guys in Snarky Puppy, I did not say, hey, I could run your record label for you. I said, hey, I have extensive experience in copyright. Do you know if all your songs are copywritten? Do you know if everything's registered correctly at your home PROs? How are you collecting that money from your PROs? Doing exactly what I did in my day job then and applying it to them, not in a way where I'm over-promising and under-delivering, but in really verifiable ways based on my experience, gave me a unique in with this band that I really wanted to work with. So I think like both being succinct in what you're saying and offering things that you can pragmatically and realistically offer from the jump, super important. No one likes bringing someone in and them saying, oh, I can do this and I can do this and I can do this. And actually, you've done that a little bit, but it's not your expertise. And you were selling one thing when it really wasn't in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, and knowing what value you can provide. I think that sort of copyright royalties space is something that's often overlooked by a lot of musicians who are more on the creative side of things, but it's super important. Could you talk a little bit about the difference between a label and a publishing company? I know that you said that you run both for GroundUp, but I think that maybe those two things might be conflated sometimes.
Yeah, of course. The U.S. copyright law splits in half the recorded music side of our industry and the performance or publishing side of our industry. Labels only deal with recorded music. Publishing only deals with compositions or songwriting. And the example I always give is if you've heard the song All on the Watchtower by Jimi Hendrix, most people know that is actually not a song by Jimi Hendrix. It is written by Bob Dylan. And so when you hear that song on the radio performed by Jimi Hendrix does not get any of the money from the radio performance of that song. It all goes to Bob Dylan. Whereas when a record is sold or a stream occurs on Spotify, there is an implication for the Jimi Hendrix estate to collect royalties. And so we're talking about the actual recorded, tangible version of the music that you're hearing that is well known versus the underlying composition that is able to be performed and arranged by anyone. And so publishing only has to do with this underlying right of composition.
Yeah. So you got your start working kind of in the mines, so to speak, in the data, maybe slightly monotonous but important work. Do you think that was important experience for you to have, and that it has affected your career and your work even today?
It was essential. It gave me a couple of things. One, it gave me a work ethic. It's a very thankless job being in the music industry for a very long time, until, if you're lucky, it's not. And I think finding a zen in the work that you're doing without looking side to side or up and down, like where can I go from here, but just like doing the work and learning for a little bit of time went really far, and like giving me perspective on how much to work and what kind of work is expected in our business. It also gave me a really deep understanding of copyright, a very boots on the ground, immediate sense of like what happens when there is a delinkage between writer and publisher, and how money can be held up for quarters or years because of bad data. And so that was super important for me when I started working with the label or the publishing company to make sure that our data is pristine. Every foreign society, every foreign label distribution partner relies on your data to pay you. And I'll tell you honestly, no one wants to pay you. They're looking for reasons not to pay you. And so the best thing you can do for yourself is ensure your data is in a crystal clear state, so that you are able to get paid, not just domestically, but internationally as well.
I see all the instruments behind you. I'm wondering, do you still do a lot of playing?
A ton. I play in a couple of bands. Still to this day. I drums in most of them. Guitar has become like a passion hobby of mine, but like I'm a drummer by trade. So cool. I still play. I have rehearsal with my band tonight.
Amazing. A lot of our viewership are people that are musicians, but also have various other types of quote unquote day jobs, whether they be in the music industry or in an opposite industry. So I'm wondering what that balance is like for you as somebody who's so successful in the industry, but also has a drive that is on the creative side. I mean, both sides are creative. We know that. But
yes.
Yeah. The actual playing side, I mean.
Yeah, this is actually a really big one for me. I made it a rule very early on to never bleed together my personal love of music and what I'm doing with my professional goals. I think that most people who work in the music business are failed musicians and failed artists who are always looking to satisfy that part of themselves, and that's wonderful. No one likes to feel like when you're having a conversation with an employee or a prospective employee that they're looking at other opportunities besides the job in front of them. And so the last thing I ever wanted to be seen as doing is leveraging my relationships with songwriters at ASCAP as a drummer. I think that really cuts against your the trust that you're given by your clientele when they feel like you have an ulterior motive. And so for me, it was really, really important. People that I work with are like shocked when they learn that I play in a band or that I'm like making music actively. And that's very much by design. I think that it's super important that your clients feel like you're putting their music first. And so I always made it my business to make sure that like my hobbies stayed my hobbies. And like I've had like decent success making music. I've had music that's played like on CBS for the NFL. I've had songs in like the show, I guess it was the Showtime show Shameless. Like I had a bunch of music that like got used for stuff, and no one in my professional world had a clue about that. That was very much intentional.
That's really interesting. I mean, it's. I feel like a lot of people are in the position of players and also that work in the industry. I mean, Eamon and myself are both the same. Um, so it's really interesting to hear you talk about these types of boundaries by design, um,
Yep.
because I feel like people that want to keep doing both don't necessarily think about that all the time. So thanks for
Yeah, I
sharing that.
think, for me, I work with a lot of artists and writers, and they are so insecure about their own station in the industry and what they're working on. And if they bring a team together to work for them, they are insecure by design. Artists are intrinsically insecure. And
Yeah.
if they feel like you are only there because you want to play bass on their record more than you want to do any of the data admin stuff that they need, it undercuts you on both sides. You're not going to get the gig as the bass player probably, and your work is going to be questioned, or at least there'll be some skepticism around your work. And so I've just always made it a rule that those, church and state.
Right. And that kind of goes back to what you were saying before about the Snarky Puppy players, and you knew what value you could offer.
Yes.
You pitched on that professional level because you knew you had the background.
Absolutely. And the fact that the first time I met them was me behind a drum set colored our relationship a little bit. They already knew that I was a player, but I never brought that up in a professional setting ever. It was only ever about them as players. And like, they'd be the ones to ask me like, "Hey, you playing at all? Are you doing?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, I'm playing. I'm doing stuff." But like, I would like very quickly move back to the work stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. You answered it, but I was going to ask if that did color your relationship, or how do you think that influenced your relationship with the people at Snarky Puppy because they first got to know you as a drummer?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's it's funny. I kept that separate for so long that when some of the guys who I didn't know as well from the beginning learned that I was a player too, they were inquisitive. They asked to hear stuff that I was doing, and like, it wasn't me ever offering it. It was like them having a genuine curiosity, and like that turned into like I had a party at my house 2 years ago, and half of Snarky flew out to New York, and we played like on my deck for 3 hours. I had like a backing band of like these Grammy Award winning players that like are playing in my town, my shitty house. Like, it's like, my house is not shitty, but like, it's very beneath them to be like playing a house party. But like, that only came to be because I was like so delicate about that part of my life.
And I think it can. I mean, I just coming at the industry from a player's background, I think can really give you a lot of empathy, a lot of just like it can really help you in working with artists and supporting them in a lot of ways.
Such a great point. I think that my experience, I have enough experience in my life sleeping on the floor of a van, sharing a bed with two bandmates at a hotel that's disgusting, to know the importance of the work that I do. And so I take the fact that like I am providing a livelihood to people super seriously. And so it makes me work that much harder when it's time to generate a royalty statement, or get to the bottom of a label issue where there's some leakage in sales data, or like whatever the case may be. Like, it allows me to like really put myself in their shoes in a way that makes me work, I think, a little bit harder for them.
Well, that sort of division is something that we talk about in a similar way a lot in our course, and it's that you have to think about your artistry if you want to be a DIY musician and book yourself. It's business, and you have to know it as if you are, a corporate business person. You have to know the financials. You have to understand the terms of your deals, even if that might not be your personality. It's a crucial part of actually selling yourself and being financially sustainable.
There is nothing more empowering than meeting an artist who not only is incredibly talented, but has their hands around their business. It is to know that someone takes their world seriously and is treating them both as equally important parts of the job, makes me take them more seriously.
Yeah. And that's how you start those networks and build the relationships, is you show up and you know what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
You have to do the work ahead of time. And that's what we hope the course teaches people.
For sure. And as we kind of like intimated before, this part of the business in particular is like very confusing. And I think that it is often like lost in the sauce, like what you can do to like maximize your publishing income, and like, that's just like this like black box area. So I'm glad we're talking about it.
Yeah, could you talk about some things that developing artists or artists who might not have that sort of copywriting, publishing experience needs? Are there, you know, three things or something that artists would need to keep in mind or are misconceptions about this area of the business?
Three really easy things that a newer artist that's a songwriter should do. The very first thing is join a PRO. It is the first decision any songwriter who's like looking to make music should make. There are two options for an American songwriter, and it's ASCAP or BMI. Those are your two choices. There are other PROs, but they're invite only. And so if you're up and coming, it's ASCAP versus BMI. And they largely function the same and provide the same level of service. You may have friends who are at one versus another. They may have either good experiences or bad experiences that may color your decision. But at the end of the day, a PRO is the very first decision that you're going to make to support yourself on the publishing side of the industry. Once you've joined that PRO, the next thing that you have to do is register every song you've ever written. And it is very laborious and very hard to do, and that's fun. But it's your business card. That is the thing. And not just in terms of like getting you paid, but both the ASCAP and BMI databases are public facing. If I go out to a bar and I say, hey, I'm a songwriter, I've written a bunch of songs, and I go to your ASCAP page, I look you up on ASCAP, and you have 3 songs registered. Either you're lazy or you're a liar. And like, I hate to put it so, but like, that's the truth. There's only one of two options. And so the very first thing any songwriter should do when they join a PRO is register every single song and make sure it's reflected accurately on the ASCAP and BMI portals. Third thing is live performance data. There is a lot of money in up and coming artists playing in small and medium sized rooms where they're playing their own music and can collect royalties for playing those shows. But the only way you can do that is by registering your set list with ASCAP or BMI. And so there's an entire page on your ASCAP or BMI portal that says like submit a set list, and you will pull from all the songs you've already registered, say this was the date I played this song, this was the capacity of the venue, tickets were sold, which is important, tickets sold versus not. All of that goes into a royalty generation that happens for you. And if you're playing 15 or 20 shows a quarter, that could be $1,000. It's like not insignificant. And for the PRO, that's vital prospecting data, right? So they're using your setlist registration as essentially a copyright claim. You're repping and warranting that you played here. If they then go to that venue and say, hey, you don't have an ASCAP license, and we know our ASCAP writer played here and played these songs on this day when you charged a price for tickets, and so it's mutually beneficial. And so those are the 3 things. They're kind of linear, but you can do right from the jump if you are playing your own music anywhere to make actual money and have your data be really complete.
Wow. I don't think many people know that they should be doing those things.
Yeah, sure.
That you can get royalty data from playing your own music live. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I'll go one step further. As your career grows and you play bigger rooms, you still register those set lists and make a lot of money. You know, if you're Taylor Swift playing at MetLife Stadium, she's probably getting $15,000 to $20,000 of like just a one-time performance of BMI income for playing that show. Now to Taylor Swift, that doesn't matter a whole lot. But the fact that there is this through line through live performance and setlist registration that puts real money into the pockets of people, like, it's not known enough, and it should be. It's a really easy way to start collecting money off your music.
Yeah, because those small amounts can make a really big difference if you're trying to make a first tour work or a first tour in a new market. You know, the margins are not always very big.
They're not, and knowing that you have $800 coming your way in 3 to 6 months allows you to budget differently. It might, there's like silly things like, and maybe you'll do less covers in your set, you'll do more original music. That all goes into the calculus of how much you get paid. So understanding that there's a live royalty component as a writer is really important.
And I think a lot of this goes back as well to how much artists have to do themselves these days. Back in the traditional label dominated industry, a lot of that probably would have been handled by a label or whatever team artists had, and now they have to know how to do it themselves.
Absolutely.
And using that to transition a little bit, could you talk about how you've seen the label ecosystem change, even just across your career? I'm sure it has, as far as streaming and the internet.
Yeah.
So how have you seen those changes occur, and what have you had to face professionally to try to situate yourself in that changing ecosystem?
Definitely. So to be clear, are we talking about labels or publishers? Because both have changed in different ways. And if we're talking publishing, I want to make sure we're going in that direction. Or if it's just label stuff, I can go that way too.
Let's start with publishing, because a lot of our courses is geared towards supporting yourself through performance.
Absolutely. So the biggest area of change in the last few years on the publishing side is the advent of what's called sync licensing, which is, just for people who don't know, a synchronization license or a sync license is granted when a song is being used in a TV show, a movie, a video game, any sort of a visual medium where you're synchronizing music to that film or to that experience. In the last 10 years, two things have happened. Streaming platforms have popped up, which have a demand for more music than ever on TV shows, films, video games. There are video games that are just dedicated to music, whether it's Guitar Hero or Beat Saber. There's an entire VR space where music is central to the experience as well. That didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago in the same way. And so the need for lots of content, and not just content that is recorded, but that is written, is essential. And I'm going to walk through why that is in a second. When you're granting a sync license, you would need the license for both the recorded side of the music, which is the label side, and the publishing side, which is the underlying composition. Let's say I only have a budget of $10,000 to put a song in a TV show. I cannot afford the Beatles version of Eleanor Rigby, but I can afford hiring someone for $5,000 to record that themselves, buy that recording from them, and now I'm only focused on the publishing side, because now I'm granting myself the license because I own the recording, and now I need to close a license for the other side. Now it'll be much more than $10,000 fee for a Beatles song, but it is a way for these production houses to really mitigate their expense by removing the recorded side from the sync licensing conversation and essentially doubling what their budget would be for closing a song. And so publishing has seen a massive uplift in all these sync requests where, Rockstar Games owns the recording of something and now just wants the grant of rights for the publishing side. So just in terms of a general change of visibility for songwriters, there's so much more opportunity now than there was 10 or 15 years ago. The second piece of that, I would say, is there's a piece of legislation called the Music Modernization Act, which was passed, I think, in 2019. And it really changed the way in which specifically digital royalties are collected and are administered in the US. And so because this law passed, I'm not going to get into the weeds on it because it's way too much stuff, but the net result is a much higher threshold for what a stream on Spotify will pay a songwriter. And so you've seen publishers who were, I think at one time, kind of taking Spotify and the DSPs, the digital streaming platforms, as kind of they are what they are. It's all of a sudden a very serious revenue driver. And so you're seeing publishers now get into a place where they're looking to the DSPs and what can they do to further help their music. And so maybe a publisher will have an artist record their songs for a Spotify exclusive, there's opportunity for publishers to go on the back end and say, why don't you do a set of a collection of my songs? I control these songs. Why don't we do a compilation of a bunch of artists? And as a matter of fact, I would not say this is the reason why this happened, but Snarky Puppy is nominated for a Grammy this year on a Henry Mancini compilation of all these songs that the Mancini estate controls, where there's Snarky Puppy and Lizzo and all these people, and like the Henry Mancini estate that owns that publishing will see a ton of money from that. And so like, that's definitely been a change in the landscape in the last couple of years for sure, because of this MMA, the Music Modernization Act, and the way that royalties are being generated for digital.
I think that kind of goes against maybe common perceptions that the rise of, streaming, both music streaming and television streaming, means that there's less value, but there's also more opportunity.
It is fair to say that if you are an artist or a songwriter, you are not being paid fairly for your music. But that's not to say that gains are not being made to correct that wrong. I think that it is absolutely fair to have an assessment that Spotify and Apple Music, and really it's much more Spotify than Apple Music. Apple Music pays a fantastic rate for songwriters. Spotify have made it their business to try and fight the publishing industry for the last 10 years. I expect that there'll be some more litigation. There's actually already some litigation happening right now where Spotify is looking to compel a lower royalty rate because they're bundling together non-music products with their music offering. And so now if you have a Spotify membership, you have like access to free audiobooks. There's no music in an audiobook. Podcasts, there's no music in a podcast. And so they're making this case that because the listenership is being diluted between music and non-musical offerings, they owe less money from their total revenue pie. So there's a case happening right now on that front. And I suspect it'll go in the publisher's favor, but like it's unclear. It's unclear.
The about page on the GroundUp site says that at least the label was founded out of a disenfranchisement with the existing ecosystem. As that ecosystem has continued to change, how has your role been a part of navigating that change and still situating yourself as a label for independent musicians?
So when Michael League was assessing options for a record deal, when the band was starting to pick up, he was throwing lots of offers from lots of different major labels and independent labels. And every single one of those offers came with a grant of rights that Michael was not comfortable with. And he felt that the notion of assigning your recordings to a third party for a lump of money now, for them to collect in the back end for a long period of time, was not in the best interest of the art or the artist. And so whether it was a small independent label or Universal Music offering him a deal, it all came with the same unfairly weighted assignment of artistic content versus value. So Michael began looking at starting his own label, and instead of allowing Universal to own or co-own or license for a set period of time the catalog, GroundUp would own all of the rights to the Snarky Puppy records, and any other artists who were signed were given some of the most favorable terms I've ever seen in the label schema. And that includes a 5-year set term. So at the end of 5 years, if your balance is unrecouped, you can walk with your record, sight unseen. That does not, usually a label will have a post-collection term and all these sort of strings that keep the music tethered to that label. GroundUp allows artists to walk away with their music at the end of a term, sight unseen. The royalty split itself is much more fair, and the reason for that is GroundUp is not offering large advances to our artists to come over. We have found that for most of our artists, they don't need the label to pony up $50,000 to pay for tracking, mixing, mastering. These artists have their own relationships, and they don't want to have a label involved in the artistic creation of their music. And so what more often happens for us as a label is we'll receive a finished record for consideration for release. And that mitigates a lot of the expense, which in turn allows me to offer a much more favorable royalty rate. So instead of doing a 50-50 deal, I'm doing a 75-25 deal in favor of the artist, which is very favorable. The third thing we do that is super uncommon in this space is we don't offer multi-album deals to anyone. And that might sound like a negative thing if you're an artist who wants to find a label home. But in truth, one of the ways in which record labels obligate you to unfair contracts is by giving you a 3-year deal with a 2-year option, right? So now there's 5 albums you have to provide before you're even considered for release of your obligation to the contract. Let's say album number 1 does really, really well, and albums 2 and 3 do terribly because the label stops working it, you're no longer a priority. They can continue to use the income from album 1, which is still doing well, to repay the expenses of albums 2 and 3. It's called cross-collateralization. You are cross-collateralizing the value from one to other records. And you can be locked into a record deal for years because of that, because you've not siloed each record of its own value. And so GroundUp, I can release a record for Becca Stevens where, and then this is just making things up here, she could owe us $100,000 on that one record. And then she has another album that's coming out, and we want to release that. That poorly performing record has nothing to do with the next deal that we're doing, which gives the artist maximum mobility to either close a deal with us or not, and leave that dead on our books and go bring their catalog somewhere else. So it's a very different way of doing business than most labels.
Thanks so much for taking time with us today. I just have one quick question to wrap up. I wanted to ask if there's someone who's hoping to get into the publishing or label space and they're aspiring to that, is there one recommendation for something they should start to learn, a skill, a tool, or a resource that you would recommend to them?
It's going to sound really, really simple, but the answer is you need to write a lot of music. You need to write a ton of music. If publishing is important to you, your catalog has to be really robust, and you have to be really unsentimental about your music. I think we're all songwriters here. When you write a song that you fall in love with, you think it's the best song that's ever been written. It's meaningful to you, and you feel so strongly about it. You're far too close to your art to be an objective purveyor of its value. And the only way to ensure that there's genuine value in your catalog is to write every single song with that mentality, but write a lot of songs. I was having a conversation with like a fairly large, successful songwriter a couple of years ago, and they said, I'm like really good at what I do, and I believe every song that I write is amazing, but I also know for every 10 songs I write, maybe one is valuable. And that's like a very well-known successful writer. If you think that like a 10% hit rate for a massive writer is good, if you're an up-and-coming songwriter, you're probably at a 1 or 2% hit rate, which means for every 100 songs you write, 1 or 2 are good. And so like the craft of songwriting has to be central before you even think about the business. And I think that is really worth noting. Let's say you've done all that and you're looking for actual tools to help you grow. There's a company called Songtrust, which is owned by Downtown Music Publishing, that offers worldwide publishing administration for writers without a publishing deal. And it's a really nice way, if your music is starting to get played around the world, you don't have a publishing deal, to receive the value of a publishing deal without, having to sign yourself away to Sony or Universal or one of these indie publishers. And so if you're looking at a catalog that you're sitting on top of and like want to get like immediate value, Songtrust is a great way to go about that.
Great. Thank you so much. This has been really, really incredibly useful information for artists, and also I learned a lot as well. So
awesome. Cool.
Yeah, thanks so much, Eric. This has been great.
Pleasure. Nice
and
to meet
it's
you guys.
really likewise. It's really nice diversification of interviews that we've done. So
I'm really happy to hear that.
yeah,
Great to chat with you guys.
thanks for joining us. It's been a little bit since our last episode, but you'll be happy to hear that we already have a few episodes lined up coming in the near future. We'll be back soon with a conversation with publicist Lydia Liebman to talk about everything she does for her roster of clients and what you need to know about publicity. If you have any other questions or want us to talk with someone from an area of the industry that we haven't explored already, let us know in the comments down below, and we'll try to get something scheduled soon. We'll see you next time.